So to begin, my name is Jenny Mullins. I'm the founder and CEO of Pixelfat Design, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the navigating the politics of design systems. But before I get too deep into that, I want to give you a little bit of my own personal background navigating design system politics myself. So at Pixelfat, we work with different clients, both large and small, to develop and help companies maintain design systems. And so we have the advantage of getting with a bunch of different folks and figure out how they approach design systems. And one thing we've realized from all this experience is that no matter what company we were working with, no matter the size, we always ran into this person. And so what you're looking at here, this beautiful artistic drawing, is a person at the top. Their hair is on fire, and at the bottom of the hill is a cool pond of water. And so ideally what this person should really be doing is running down that hill and dunking their head in the water, but they're not doing that. They're putting up a brick wall between themselves and the water. And so this is just an illustration of what it can be like sometimes to create a design system. You're working with people, you're trying to create tools that are going to make their lives easier, and they push back, and it's hard to understand why. And we got to a point where we ran into a person like this just about every project. And we kind of had this idea like, okay, well, this is just part of design systems. You're just going to run into somebody that's going to push back, and that's part of it. But the reality is the problem wasn't so much this person with their hair on fire. The problem was us and our approach. So it's taken us a long time and a good amount of experience to really understand that design systems aren't about tools. They're about organizational change. At the core of it, you're asking people to change the way they do things. And if you want to change the way people do things, you're most likely going to have to navigate politics. So if you are like me and you hear the word politics, you probably have this sort of internal shudder, this sort of thought of like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. But I don't truly believe politics has to have such a negative connotation. I believe we can think about politics not so much as something where we're having to manipulate or browbeat people into a particular direction, but rather as a way to empathize with our team and try to really understand where they're coming from. So my hope is that at the end of this talk, you will be able to walk away with a greater ability to identify users, stakeholders, champions, and detractors, as well as some concrete tools to help you understand and align your team so you can bring that back to your organization and get that design system built. So in order to accomplish that, we're going to cover 3 topics. The first one is understanding your political landscape. The second is creating a common vision. And the third is keeping the momentum going. So let's start with understanding your political landscape. So as I'm sure everybody here knows, building a design system is basically like building any other product. It doesn't matter that you're building it for an internal team versus an external consumer. It's the same. So you're going to have consumers and you're going to have investors, and both of those groups are going to really require different things. So another way to say consumer and investor is users and stakeholders. And that's anybody that needs to convince somebody else to expend resources to create and maintain a design system. And so this is a piece that can get forgotten, is that design systems require support, whether that's financial or people or time or whatever. Anyways, these people, they tend to be leadership. So you're looking at like CEOs, heads of designs, the VP of design, of design or engineering, or even engineering managers or design managers. Or it could be all of the above. And the thing about users and stakeholders is that they, like most and all people, are often driven by their fears and desires. So we all have fears and desires, and those will drive our actions a lot of times. So in order to really understand your users and stakeholders, you're going to need to get to the bottom of, hey, what drives them in terms of fears and desires? So you're going to run into some common scenarios, most likely. It's different everywhere. Every company is a bit of a snowflake. People are complex, but we've seen some common themes over the years that I can share here. So users, common user fears that we would run into, designers, when you talk about design systems, you might run into fear of losing creative control or fear of bureaucracy. And for engineers, I'll often see fear of another redesign. Is this design system going to come with a massive redesign that's going to be poorly thought through and be very expensive for engineers? Or fear of more bad handoffs. If there's been bad handoffs in the past, which there probably are, if you're looking to invest in the design system, like there's a concern that there might be more of the same. However, desires tend to be fairly well aligned. So, between designers and engineers, we would often hear things like, you desire a cohesive product. You desire freedom from building or designing that button again. Nobody wants to do it. Desire a more seamless handoff between designers and engineers. We really want that to be much easier to use. Stakeholders, on the other hand, are a completely different ball of wax. These are different types of people. They have different responsibilities, so their fears are going to be different. They're going to be afraid that a design system will never be done, right? I mean, you've probably heard that at some point. They're going to fear justifying the cost of a design system to their boss because they are expensive. They're going to fear that the design system isn't actually helping. Like, is it, if the goal is that a design system would speed things up and at some point it looks like it's slowing things down, that can be a real concern. Desires, on the other hand, are more straightforward and they're easier to understand. They, like users, desire efficiency. They desire a faster time to market. They desire a cohesive product. The best way to learn people's fears and desires is by talking to them and interviewing them and giving them different tools, basically user testing. So we use user testing to get to know our customers. We can use user testing to get to know our team. It's a really fantastic tool. So what are some specific ways that we can begin to use user testing within these different groups? So for users, I like to use a survey. It's a really sort of simple, low-cost way to cast a wide net. Google Forms, fine, but whatever floats your boat. And you basically want to include at least one person from each platform or each product area. So you're trying to make sure you're being very inclusive. And it doesn't take very much time to get something like this out. And I usually write a separate one for designers as well as for engineers. And that's just because it'll be a little bit more attuned to either group. Of course, with all user testing, you want to avoid leading questions. And then once you start to get these responses back, you're going to notice some louder voices. Either they're going to be positive champions or they're going to be more negative detractors, or just people that are really hurting in their day-to-day and just upset about the frictions that they're having to deal with. Those are the people that you're going to want to follow up with in one-on-ones, whether you're grabbing coffee with them or you're doing it in a more structured way where it's recorded. Make sure that you do make the time to meet those people one-on-one though. Stakeholders are a little bit of a different breed. It's going to be a smaller group. You're probably not going to cast as wide a net. The first thing you want to do is identify your stakeholders. It's not always obvious who the stakeholders are. I'm sure we've all had the experience of working on a project and then halfway through, somebody comes in that has really strong opinions and you're like, man, why didn't I, involve that person a little bit earlier? So you want to do your best to get anybody that could be a stakeholder brought on early. And what I like to do is to get them in a room and perform what I call a post-mortem, which is basically where you ask somebody to pretend they're looking back on this project once it's already completed and describe what it would look like if it had failed. And then you describe what it would look like if it had been successful. And then based off of that, you're going to get a really clear picture of what the fears and desires are of this group. And it's going to be different for different people. And as you're doing this, you want to channel your inner therapist. You want to make a lot of space for people to talk about things that they're worried about or they're excited about. Don't feel the need to convince them that they shouldn't be worried about something or that, oh yeah, you want that? We're definitely going to do it. Just try to listen and be there and make that space. Once you've gotten a clear picture of the fears and desires of your team and you've essentially established the political landscape, what you're working with. that is the time to start to use that information to create a common vision. So that's going to be the fuel that's going to, or the foundation that's going to feed the rest of your efforts. One of the tools I really like to use to create a common vision is a North Star presentation. So I know a North Star presentation could mean a lot of different things in a lot of different contexts. But in this case, what I'm talking about is any kind of presentation that's going to align your users and your stakeholders, and it's going to conceptualize what it is you're creating. So sometimes with design systems, like we work in design systems, it's very clear what a design system is and what's going to be involved, but it isn't necessarily clear for someone that's not doing that on a day-to-day basis. So try to find a way to really make it tangible. Sometimes just naming the design system or naming the project can be really helpful. And you ultimately want to deliver a vision that everyone can get excited about. So that's going to be different from, depending on where you're at. So if you are doing more of like a big bang redesign, then you might want to show, hey, this is what the redesigned product is going to look like once we roll this out. Or if you're focusing more on sort of infrastructure and less on UI, you might say, hey, here's what an ideal process will look like. So you're just basically creating a vision to shoot for. This is also a good time to go ahead and level set expectations. Just try to like gently let people know what is a reasonable expectation and what maybe isn't. So some examples of that are like, how will designers build? Will there be a shared library? Yes. Will there be freedom from having to design a button for the umpteenth time? Yeah. Will it make shipping faster? Eventually, yeah. Will everyone be singing Kumbaya around a campfire? Probably not. So just being really clear up front with what people should expect. Okay. You've established your foundation. You understand the fears and goals or desires of your teammates. You've created a vision that's gotten everyone excited. Now and only now you are ready to actually create the design system, which I know sounds crazy, but that foundational work is really important to pave the way for you to actually then do the work. And as you're doing this, you're going to realize that design systems are expensive. That's just the reality. They're expensive. They take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years to really roll out to a project or to a product. They require a lot of resources, whether that's money or people, and they require people to change their behavior, which we all know is a very difficult thing to accomplish. In order to sort of keep that support for your design system over time, you're going to have to keep the momentum between your users and your stakeholders. And we've kind of found that meeting with either group or both groups rather, a minimum of about once a month is a pretty nice place to be. It might be more, it might be less. It kind of just depends on what the landscape is at your own organization. But the truth is, this is ultimately going to mean that you're not just building a design system, you're promoting it at the same time. So what are some tools that you can use to promote the design system as you're building it? And again, it's going to be different between users and stakeholders. So for users, one of the best things that you can do is to just be inclusive, to make your team really feel involved. Some simple tools to do that are just a Slack channel, just giving people space to ask questions and make requests and pull feedback. This is also a great place for you to be able to ask them feedback on things. Or brown bags. So as you're rolling stuff out, things are going to change. Maybe there'll be new documentation, whatever. It's a good habit to get into where you can share that out in a regular way with your team. This is also a great place to get feedback, especially if it's negative. You really want to make that space for people to be able to give that those requests and collective feedback. All right, stakeholders. Stakeholders are, you almost want to spend more attention on stakeholders than users, but I actually don't know if that's true. I think it's probably equal, but they're very different. So stakeholders, they've got a different set of responsibilities. They are the ones that are basically sort of putting their credibility and their budget on the line to support a design system. And at some point, this will happen. They're going to look at the design system project and say, I don't see any progress. I don't see what's happening. And this is really expensive. Was this a mistake? And they're going to be worried because they're going to have to go to their boss and explain what's happening. So one thing that you can always do to keep momentum on your project is to make sure you always give stakeholders something that they can take to their bosses, right? So what are stakeholders going to care about? They're not going to be interested in the same sort of things users are. They're not going to want to be in the weeds. They're really going to want to get high level progress. And although this could be it can and is an entire talk in and of itself, things that you might do to establish that progress is basically create key KPIs and then track them over time. So some examples of things that you might that a stakeholder might be interested in is, like, say, an adoption stat. So you can see this in Figma Design System Analytics for one. Team engagement stats, you can track this in Slack. Team satisfaction stats, you can roll out an NPS in a survey. Or demos, just something really quick and easy to just demonstrate, hey, look how much easier it is for designers to design with this new way versus the old way. And as you're thinking about users, as you're thinking about stakeholders, as you're trying to create momentum and adoption, you always want to strategize for small wins early and often. And this is where that work to figure out what people are interested in, what their desires are, will really pay off. Because you can find out what their friction points are, like what's really bugging them on a day-to-day basis. And from that, you can identify things that are cheap and easy to fix. And you're going to want to optimize those in your roadmap so that you can start to build enthusiasm and ultimately adoption among your team early on. So this concludes the end of the presentation. To kind of wrap it all up, I want to leave you with one simple idea, and this could ideally save you 20 minutes, but it's too late. You've already gone on this ride with me. The core of it is, if you really want to create a great design system, if you want to create organizational change, and you need to navigate politics, the best thing you can do is to just make that effort to empathize with and understand your teammates. That is the key. Don't get frustrated when someone has a different perspective from you. Don't get frustrated when someone puts the brakes on something. Try to stop and really just understand where they're coming from, and then that will serve you well. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I'll be around Q&A if anyone has any questions.